Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1014 of our daily content grind, and today we're doing another tier list, and this one is a Patreon request. I was asked to cover the entirety of the Universe 2.0 toy line, and that is a difficult one to cover, not only because if we're going to be doing new molds, then that includes the Legends class figures, because those are pretty significant because of the way they were treated. So we do have to include those. However, it's a tricky line because a lot of the larger Voyager class figures were repaints, so there's very few of those to talk about. And Universe 2.0 became something of a catch-all for whatever exclusive they wanted to do. So you had multi-packs from different generations worth of toys that were Universe 2.0. You had G1 reissues, you had Titanium repaints, you had Masterpiece releases, all under the 2.0 umbrella. So when your line is like half brand new toys and half weird reissues, repaints, and releases, it gets very difficult to kind of narrow down exactly what the identity of the line is for a tier list like this. So here's what I have decided. We are going to be discussing basically the main run of figures in this one, from Legion all the way up to the Ultra class, and we're going to include just the brand new molds, with 2 remolds thrown in because, given the context, I do think they are significant enough to talk about. Also, I like these to be at around 30, so I needed to bump up the list a little bit. And then, if you want to see more, if you want me to cover the rest of it, we'll do the same thing I did with the Beast Wars line, and we'll do a part 2 at some point, probably next week, perhaps, mayhaps, or maybe a little bit later, because I do have Metrocon coming up, so I need filler. Either way, at some point we might discuss, and we'll do this again, but this time we'll just discuss the repaints and where they fall in. But for now, we'll be discussing 30 of the brand new toys that came out for the line in my traditional tier list of Holy Grail, Premium Price, Retail Release, Bargain Bin, and Flea Market. And we have to start with Beachcomber. Now, keep in mind, my grading scale is always bang for your buck. How good is the toy for how much they were asking for? And that does let us fairly compare a Legends class toy to an Ultra class toy. That said, Beachcomber is very much middle of the road. He has a very simple transformation, and granted, there are Legends and Legion classes that do have very interesting transformations for their sizes. In this case, however, Beachcomber is the standard level of articulation, standard level of detail, and really not a whole lot in the transformation department compared to some of the others. I think he makes a pretty good start at the middle of the road retail release. I think he's going to end up like square in the middle by the time all this is done. This is why I wanted to do the Legends class toys in this, by the way, is because they focused on doing mini bots at this scale, which meant for the first time you actually had some semblance of scale between all of the Transformers released until we get to the Ultra class, but that's another thing. Let's move on to Brawn. And now Brawn is a little bit different. I like the mold better. I do think it's a little bit more fun as a little figurine than Beachcomber is. He does have a little bit of oddness to his deco. He's got an orange chest instead of a yellow, and they darkened his face a lot, potentially just to make it stand out from the helmet. It's a weird deco choice. It does make him look a little bit odd, but the toy itself is fun. The toy itself is not bad at all. I do think it's a little bit more substantial than Beachcomber, so I put him closer to the top. Now we have a duo of Bumblebees to talk about. So I did include the animated releases in here, even though technically some of them came out in multi-packs first, because this is their first technical, normal retail launch. Okay, so there's going to be a little bit of, it's going to be a little wonky in here, grading on some of those. But the animated Bumblebee, for what it is, I do think is pretty clever. So it's a fairly nice little Legends class toy. Comes together pretty nicely. I do enjoy it as a figure, and I do think it does a pretty good job of capturing the spirit of the animated Bumblebee, the deluxe, at a very small scale. Now, obviously, it's not perfect. It's a Legends class, so don't really expect it to do everything. But I think at least it was a better example of the size class. And out of the animated figures, There's only one I would put higher. For now, he'll probably end up low end of the premium price. For a little tiny $5 figure, he was really fun. And that takes us to Bumblebee, as, now we're talking the G1 style. And this is another, we don't have the Volkswagen, so we're doing the best we can style figures. It does an okay job of just being a modern mini-bot at the Legends class scale. I don't think it's as impressive as the animated Bumblebee. It's a little bit odd in just like, his arms are very panely because of how he has to transform. He's a little bit, I don't know, he's not like, he doesn't have the right body shape for Bumblebee. Like, he's thin in the wrong areas in the wrong ways, and he's not thick enough in the others. So it's an odd Bumblebee, so I think proportionally he's a little bit weird. I think I'm going to put him in between. I think I like the Brawn a little bit better. Brawn feels more like Brawn than that Bumblebee feels like Bumblebee. The Cheetor when we start getting into a few rough areas. So Universe 2.0 does have some bangers in its lineup, but there's a few that I think everyone kind of universally agreed on that this really could have been better, and I think that starts with Cheetor. So, if you remember, the original G1 Cheetor, okay, I'm not tired. If you remember Beast Wars Cheetor, the focus was on getting the robot mode to look good, and in order to do that, they had to make him like a absolute unit of a cheetah. So he's a very thick, very muscular cheetah, which is not really a thing. So the emphasis on Universe 2.0 was to make the cheetah much more realistic in proportions. But the cost of that was a robot mode that was very scrawny and awkward and lanky in a lot of ways, very bulky in its kibble, especially like what's hanging off the back, because they did like a weird eye change and mouth open gimmick that went through the entirety of the neck of the cheetah mode. And then he's got weird like shurikens. When did Cheetor have shurikens? You put that in with like the big kibble issues on his arms that restricted his elbow articulation and just looked really awkward. You end up with this Cheetor that has a very skewed priority, and I think it was the wrong idea. Oh, I mean, if you judge it for what it went for, it's okay, but as an overall toy, it's just a letdown. Cosmos, my boy Cosmos, finally. Remember, Cosmos was supposed to be a classics toy, and then he was supposed to be a titanium toy, but that design survived long enough to eventually get this tiny little crumb of a release as a Universe Legends class, and at least he got something. The poor boy got something. So he has a much more slender take on Cosmos, aside from the arms, which are most of the UFO pie plate. And he comes across as kind of like hulked out as far as Cosmoses go, instead of being like round and portly as his traditional shape. So it's like fit lean Cosmos for a new age. Let's see, he's a fun toy, and it's just charming just to see his UFO mode again. We've gotten Cosmos since, so we're a little bit better. I will say, like, while he looks good, maybe not quite representative of the original, maybe a little bit off there, but still, decent figure, decent enough. Let us move on to Cyclonus. And Cyclonus, you'll recall, I believe I named him one of the best toys of the decade, because that toy is absolutely fantastic. You had a really nice transformation that kept his vehicle mode rather lean, not too much under kibble or anything. He looked like a pretty sleek, thin jet, which is exactly what you want out of a Cyclonus. He came with the Target Master, which was a huge bonus. That didn't happen back in the day. Like, it's been that was a really special little addition. And they made it even better because the Target Master could actually mount in his hand as normal, or you could do the Headmaster style, which would replace his hand and just attach the Target Master straight onto the forearm. That's cool too. So it worked for both US and Japanese markets. Repaints would come out later that I like better because they solidify the color scheme a little bit more and make him a little bit more animated in color. Here he's representing the toy version, which is still pretty good. And yeah, it's a fantastic toy. I still really, really like that toy. Oh, Dinobot. All right, so here's the story behind the Dinobot. Universe 2.0 was very Autobot heavy. They didn't really have a lot in the way of Decepticons, so when they decided to do a Cheetor, they also decided to do a Predacon to go with him. Now, rather than risk themselves on like a Tarantulas or a Waspinator, they decided to play it safe and release one of the most popular characters in all of Transformers, Dinobot. But they released him as Predacon Dinobot before he joined the Maximals. But in order to push this idea even further, they altered his color scheme in a weird way to make him look a little bit more villainous. So the bronze became gold, the blue became purple, and it was just a weird Dinobot overall. The toy itself is okay. It's not a fantastic take on Dinobot, about as good as you would expect for mid-2000s engineering, but it's the colors and the presentation of the Dinobot that throws it off. Now, granted, they did come up with a faction switch gimmick, so you could switch him to being a Maximal from a Predacon. That's not a bad touch, but it really does hurt. Like when the Takara version put him in normal colors, he comes across so much better. The darker colors in the Raptor mode don't help either. So it really just kind of feels like this like alternate universe Dinobot on an already on a figure that's just okay. So when you put an okay figure and then like really mess up the paint scheme, that ends up in the bargain bin. A little bit better than Cheetor, but we meet. Okay, okay. So once again, I try to get this in order, but this stupid thing never comes up in order exactly. So it wants me to talk about Galvatron right now, so we're going to talk about the Galvatron. I think I did the review on this back in the day, and I was way too nice to it. A fan recently gifted me this figure, so I have it in my life again. Oh my god, I forgot. It is bad. So the story of this figure is that it was originally slated for the Ultra class, but either because like I believe it was just like a thing of like we have too many big tanks right now because of the movies. So, or whatever it's one of those really dumb reasonings. It's one of those really dumb reasonings where they decided, let's just take it down to deluxe class, which makes no sense for Galvatron, but they did it anyway. And there was a lot of like superfluous details added in because he was supposed to have this like walker tank mode in order to kind of have some kind of semblance of a cannon mode. And the little pieces of it that were meant for that are still there, but only half of them. They didn't finish the mode, so you just have a bunch of superfluous parts, which makes him super weird. And then the figure himself is not all that great. You know, the gray tank into like a kind of purple Galvatron doesn't work. I don't think the asymmetric design on him really works all that well. The toy doesn't feel great. You could tell it was supposed to be a larger figure because it just feels just kind of messy and kind of janky in robot mode. Yeah. I really should have plastic addict this toy. It's not a good take on Galvatron. It is not a good take on Galvatron in the least. Now we can talk about my old friend. So, I said it in a, I think I made a joke of it in the Energon Hotshot video for Plastic Addict, that, okay, it's still problematic, but he is better. And yes, I will say this version of Hotshot is better than the Armada and the Energon, but he is problematic as well. Like, Hotshot just cannot catch a break ever. So you have a Hotshot who has a worse version of his Minicon, because this one has no ability to stand up on his own in any sort of normal position. You have a very overcomplicated transformation that I think is wholly unnecessary, and it leaves him with some pretty bad kibble problems that, again, hinders his shoulder articulation. Every Hotshot released until recently has very hindered shoulder articulation for some reason. Yeah, so he gets bonus points for having his Minicon. The Japanese version got to have 2 rocket launchers on top of that. But overall, it's a messy toy. I will say I guess I like it better than the Dinobot. I kind of like it better than the Dinobot. but there's so many better deluxes in this line. Like, why would you spend your money on the hotshot? Oh my god, it's such a problematic toy, which just is his lot in life, I think. We got a couple hounds to talk about, and the first one is Legends class, and this is about exactly what you would expect. It is a Legends class hound that is very simple in transformation. It kind of basically does how the G1 toy does the transformation. It's not the most impressive thing, and it's a very simple figure. That said, I do think it comes together pretty well. It does just kind of look like a mini version of G1 Hound, which is exactly what they were going for on this. So, Legends in this one, if you haven't noticed by now, are kind of split between three things. Let's do the mini-bots. Let's do cheap versions of some major characters. Let's get a little mini-bots for the animated line. Okay, so we got a lot of... We're juggling a little bit here, but all of it kind of works together in a weird way. It doesn't have the charm of Cosmos, but I do think it's better presented than the Bumblebee. So there we go, right in the retail. I thought Beachcomber would last in the middle longer than this, but he's very quickly going down to the bottom. Now the Deluxe Hound, and the Deluxe Hound is interesting for a couple reasons. Number one, I will tell you right now, my usual criticism over Universe 2.0 is the fact that a lot of the engineering from the movie lines still exists here, and I do think it overcomplicates the designs of these toys sometimes. But Hound is the one that feels the most like another Classics toy. He's got a more rounded aesthetic. His transformation is far more intuitive. You can tell that while some of these toys, which we'll be talking about one very soon, definitely feel like they were influenced by how the designers and engineers at Takara were doing the movie toys. But this one feels more like the people handling the animated toys were handling this one. It's a very, very nice Hound. And you know what? For all the complaints that we had over like waiting on an Earth mode Hound out of the Siege mold, this one is still stood out pretty well. Like if this one was still in your collection, you're doing okay. You didn't really need him that much. I really, really like this Hound. It's also interesting because it comes with a Ravage as an accessory, like a full-size cassette that transforms into a really nice Ravage, actually, and it is the proper size to fit in G1 Soundwave. So, and it is kind of playing off a G1 episode, you know, episode 2 where Hound has Ravage captured. So you got a nice little homage in there. So two figures in one. I really, really like the toy. Yeah, it's going to be high premium. I don't think it hits the like engineering spark that Cyclonus does, but it's a really good toy. That moves us on to Inferno. The only new oh no, hang on. What is this thing making me do? All right. Sorry. I forgot to switch. There's the nice Hound we're talking about. I do apologize for that. Let's talk about the Inferno though. So, Inferno is the only brand new mold released for this line in the Voyager class setup. All of the others are Cybertron repaints, with the exception of a Repaint Jetfire. And it's a weird figure. Because, once again, it kind of fits in with Classics, but it's also kind of doing its own thing. He's got some kibble to him. He is very basic in how he works, and he brings back the Energon hips, which I did not miss. Those. I would be happy for those to stay in 2004, but no, they came back. The figure itself is fine. Like, it's a dead solid toy, don't get me wrong. It is very simplistic as a toy. And yeah, like, it's a very squat take on a fire truck. I do know there are short fire trucks like this. It's a very short fire truck. Overall, though, it is not bad. It's not bad at all. It's very solid. It is a very solid figure. I might put him up premium. He's that big mass type block figure that I really like. So we'll put him up to the low end of the premium. Now, let's talk about this Ironhide. Oh boy. I have had a lot of issues with this Ironhide over the years. I understand an SUV is a modern version of a van, so I understand them using that as the alt mode. It does feel a little weak for Ironhide. There are problems to this Ironhide. Number one, the transformation I've always felt is way overcomplicated for what it is. It's a blocky character turning into a blocky vehicle. There really should not be any like major things going on, in the process of that. But somehow this manages to overcomplicate that. You had an internal gimmick, which I think does harm the engineering overall, though I will admit it kind of looks neat seeing the rear windshield, become a robot chest. That's neat. You do have a lot more movie style aesthetics going on to some of his robot mode parts. This is where that Revenge of the Fallen style engineering and design was creeping in. You have the blue face that everyone hates. That was weird. You have the weird accessory that like flip around and attaches to his arm. That was weird. No way to like just plug it into his hand, by the way. You had the legs, which had these like floating ankle things because the legs transform really weird. You have a vehicle mode that looks very broken up because of all the different panels going on in this toy. Like his windshields literally look cracked. And the windshields are bright blue, which do not match his translucent plastic at all. I don't like this toy. I do not like this toy. There was going to be a running change that fixed the weird blue face for a silver one. They never did it. You have to get to Takara to get the silver face and the yellow stripe down the side. You got to go to Takara for that. It's still not a great toy. So the Legends class Jazz. This one switches up from G1 a little bit because it kind of flips over the rear to become the legs. So he doesn't have like dedicated robot legs anymore. He just has like the back half of the car. But beyond that, it's a nice, normal kind of take on Jazz. Just this nice little small iteration. Could use some paint on the side windows, but that's a Legends class toy thing. I'm not gonna knock it for that. It's just a cute little version of Jazz. Nothing too overly complicated. I do think it's just a nice little normal figure. Nothing really to say about it. The Megatron is interesting because, to my knowledge, it's the last time a G2 style Megatron body was actually molded. Everything after this has been G1 style body that has been shoehorned into being green and purple. And it's never really looked good. This one takes a far more subdued angle on that color scheme. It is there, but it's using olive green, more military in shade rather than the neon green. The purple has been far more subdued. It is a much flatter color. So they're going for a little bit more of a realistic vibe to him. Overall, it really does just kind of come across as the original toy shrunken down, which could be a good or bad thing in your case. I think it's a little bit novel. I do think it makes him kind of neat for his price. It's just a fun little tank toy. Nothing really bad to say about it. Doesn't do anything extreme, but I think for its price, it does okay. Now, Onslaught. Now, we are judging this on the caveat that you got a fixed version, because the early run Onslaughts had a glitch in its electronics to where if you press the button and you held it down, you were supposed to hear an ongoing siren noise, but because of a little bit of glitching, it only played once. So you hold the button and just go, woo! Where's the others? Where's the other woos? There's only one woo. Later runs fixed that. So we're going to judge this beyond being just like as that one. Now, it is not an accurate vehicle mode. He is an APC now, a very heavily armored and armed one, but he's no longer not that long military truck. But I think it works. I think he wears it really well. I think the overall look to the toy is really, really cool. It's just a big bruiser of a figure. It's a cool take on Onslaught. If you're gonna make him an independent figure, it's not a bad idea for it. Yeah, he goes way high. I really like that Onslaught a lot. I still have him as Bakhan Clench. I still really like that mold. Animated Optimus. Okay, this one I don't think is delivered as well as the Bumblebee, unfortunately. It's just a little bit, there's a little bit too much hanging off in the wrong spots. Like the wheels from the front end up hanging off on the underside of the arms. It doesn't come across as smoothly as Bumblebee does. So I can't put him terribly high. I don't have a whole lot to say about him beyond that. Again, I think he's somewhere right in the middle. Functionally, he's a little bit better articulated, but I don't think his looks hold up compared to like Cosmos and some of the higher up Legends classes. Here's an interesting one. Power Glide as an Ultra Class toy. Big boy. Lights and sounds. We can't get a deluxe Power Glide today, but back then we could get a $30 one, which would be like a leader class size now. That was fine, because they had a big thing about the vehicles being more realistic sizes sometimes, which is complete counterpoint to the tank Galvatron, but we know why that happened. Point being, they wanted a big jet figure, but they didn't want him to be bright red, so they decided to do white with red accent. And if you don't know this line, that's going to get real silly here in a minute. It is a big clunky figure. I don't think it's that well presented overall. Like, I don't think it's as great of a figure as I remember. Like, it's still fun to mess with. Don't get me wrong. It's lights, it's sounds, and it's kind of hilarious to see a Power Glide that big. Eventually, yes, a red version was made. That one does look substantially better and definitely suits the character more. This just became a really odd version. Just a really odd take on Power Glide, like if Power Glide got the Matrix or something. So I think I want to put him, if we're going bang for your buck, I do still think it's a cool figure. It's just an odd figure. It can be weird and odd, but it can still be a really nice toy. It's just it's interesting is what it is. I'll put him up high, because if I'm going bang for your buck, there's definitely bang to that toy. We'll see here in a few minutes how that flips around. All right. We are talking about Animated Prowl as a Legends class toy. And you know what? This one is actually pretty impressive. Aside from the fact that, yeah, it conveys a pretty decent version of Animated Prowl. The bike mode looks fine, works fine. For a Legends class toy, pretty involved transformation. Better articulation than most. He does have the ball joints to actually put off some good poses, which you need in any kind of Prowl. And just for the price, I do think it's presented exceptionally well. I told you, like, the Bumblebee is really well presented for its price. Prowl is almost spot on. Like, even that Bumblebee has a little bit of backpack kibble that I don't want in my Bumblebee. Prowl is just clean. Prowl is just doing great. This is a fantastic little representation of the character. I'm actually putting him up to Holy Grail. Yeah, you're seeing someone actually put Onslaught and a Legends class toy on the same tier, because I think for $30 back in the day, that Onslaught is really, really good. And I think for $5, that Prowl is really, really good. So that is how we do it here. See, just to make sure, just to make sure my slides are intact. I apologize if the slides are not big enough. This is like all the space I've got on the overlay. I'm trying here. I got to redesign the whole thing specifically for tier listing in the future. Okay, so who are we up to? We're up to Prowl. This is another one of those designs that I feel like the Revenge of the Fallen engineering comes through a little bit. Not nearly to the extreme of Ironhide, though. This one, engineering-wise, still makes sense. It still feels like an upgraded version of the original Datsun. There is some weirdness to him, like the fact that a lot of his side panels come off to fold in behind his door wings. So he does end up with a little bit more bulk hanging off of him as a result. And his neck is really high. I never understood that. Like for whatever reason, the way they design the neck, it just kind of floats above the torso and looks really, really weird. Like the toy store just got BotCon Rapido that was made from this mold and reminded me of that. And it's still really odd looking. The mold itself, though, is decent. It's actually a pretty good mold. So like I can knock it for being a little bit weird and handling some things in an odd way. But at the end of the day, the mold itself is still pretty good. I think I'd put it like low end to premium, because it is doing a few things odd that does make me go, but not enough to like discourage me or make me claim that it is a bad toy overall. I think overall it's still a pretty good figure. Let's talk about the Ratchet now. So like I said, this is one of the only retools that we're going to be talking about in this list, but it's significant enough because it does do some things better than Ironhide. So obviously the head is done correctly. The face is actually silver. It's still doing this weird drooping down thing. You know, like the face is not staring straight ahead. That's another weird issue to the Ironhide. It does carry over some of the same problems. I do think the white plastic does hide some of the paneling in vehicle mode a little bit better. What's interesting about the toy is that they actually gave it a much heavier deco in the vehicle mode than Ironhide. Whereas like on Ironhide, all I want is yellow stripes down the side. And the Universe 2.0 couldn't even pull that off. But there's an interesting thing, like the way this toy is engineered, there's a big red panel on the top of the vehicle mode, because that's where the unpaintable plastic lives, and it has to be in red for the other parts. So they just painted stripes. They painted red stripes down the side to create this like rescue vehicle aesthetic. And I think it's an interesting aesthetic. I think that actually makes the panel on top look kind of good. You know, and I like the overall look of the vehicle. I like the Easter egg on the back too, because the license plate reads "Help Us" as a reference to Ratchet and Megatron's really famous appearance in Marvel Comics. So while it still suffers some of the same flaws as the original Ironhide toy, I do think it presents better. You know, I'm still not the biggest fan of the mold, but I will admit when the presentation is done right, it definitely does improve. Here's a Rodimus. And the Rodimus is an oddball because it makes no attempt to be futuristic in any way. If anything, he just kind of looks like a souped up streetcar with a big spoiler on the back. And the spoiler isn't even the traditional shape. It's flat. It's not V-shaped in this one. I always thought in this like weird way that I looked at this toy, I always looked at it and went, this doesn't feel like it was designed to be Hot Rod. You know, like there's just something about it that just kind of screams to me generic Autobot. And just the fact that it's Hot Rod, it was just kind of there. Like they could have easily just called this any random G1 Autobot that worked like this. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if this was like a sideswipe at some point. But it's not a bad figure overall. Again, on the simple side for the Legends class, nothing that I think is terribly exciting. I'm going to put him a little bit below. Actually, let's put him below Cosmos because I still really like Cosmos's presentation. Yeah, I just don't think it conveys Hot Rod as well as they really needed to. And I'm not sure why. They're just going for like a more realistic take on Hot Rod, but it takes the character out. You can't really do that. I'm not a fan when they do that. Okay, here's another Ultra Class. No, once again, my slide's messed up. So now it wants me to talk about Sideswipe. That's weird. Okay. So yeah, let's talk about the Universe 2 Sideswipe then. So this is the other retool that's in here, because technically I believe the Sunstreaker came first. But we can talk about it in tandem because it is the same toy, but it's probably one of the smartest toys that Hasbro and Takara have ever come up with. The problem with Sideswipe and Sunstreaker is they're depicted as brothers. They're both Lambos, but they can't share a mold because the robot modes look so different from each other. So some genius at Takara figured out how to actually make one mold appear as two, as the backside of one of them is the front of the other. So in order to make the different characters out of the same mold, all they had to do was turn the torso around during transformation, use a different head, and swap which hand gets on which arm. That's genius. It's absolutely genius, and it works really, really well. The Sideswipe, again, same with Sunstreaker. You can see a little bit of the movie engineering in it, but it's not overtly done. Again, it's just a really nice, solid Sideswipe figure. It was really fun back in the day. This thing was just genius for fan modding. People were coming up with different leg configurations in order to get, in order to make them look even more different from each other. People were coming up with their own like kit bashes because these just like had so many different options to them. It was a great fiddle figure, an absolutely great fiddle figure. So here's the thing. Yeah, I kind of want to put the Sideswipe up at the top of the premium list because it is such an impressive toy. And then we'll get back to that. Now we're back on track. Let's talk about the Silverbolt. And now, you remember how, like, I mentioned that like it felt like Powerglide turned into a white jet because they wanted to avoid having a big red jet for some reason. They wanted a more realistic color scheme, so they did a white and red Autobot jet at the Ultra class. Silverbolt is a white and red Autobot jet at the Ultra class. I mean, not... I'm simplifying it for the sake of a joke, but that really did feel like what it was. Silverbolt's more on the silver side, as opposed to his traditional G1 white color scheme. He's a little bit darker in colors. But it really did feel weird for them to make that choice, because these were back-to-back waves. It was very bizarre to go from Silverbolt to Powerglide, feeling like, well, the vehicle mode's very different, but they were kind of going for the exact same thing here. I don't know, it just made the choice of white Powerglide feel even stranger, you know? The other thing about this toy, it's dead simple. This is not a complex or interesting transformer to transform. It carries most of the vehicle mode on its back. It kind of folds itself up and just like tucks its legs and arms away. It's a dull toy. It's a very tall toy. When you compare it to the other Ultras in this toy line, Onslaught and Powerglide, you end up with a very bare bones and very simple Silverbolt, which was really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. It just didn't live up, you know? I mean, if we're honest, if I'm being dead honest, if I'm being honest with my opinion and we're going for bang for your buck, bargain bin. Honestly, that is not a good toy. It's just, compared to what else they were doing at that size class, very dull, very underwhelming. Absolutely could have been better. Yeah, so apologies to Silverbolt fans. Your boy was done dirty. And I will flat out admit it. All right, last animated Legends class toy. This is the Starscream, and this one is okay again. I feel like it kind of falls in the same realm as Optimus Prime in that I can tell it's the character. It does a decent enough job, but there is definitely some suffering for the smaller size. I'm not going to be too long on this one. It's just okay. I think it presents a little bit better than Optimus, but it does have its flaws. So we'll put them there. We'll put them there. These just don't compare to Prowl or Bumblebee. That's just the honesty of it. All right, now, if this will behave, yes, now we can talk about the Sunstreaker. So we've already talked about this mold. This is the first iteration of it. And I can remember thinking back to when this toy was announced, how like excited people were, not only because Sunstreaker was one of those characters that we really wanted in classics and never got to see, and you know, because Bumblebee in the movies came out, you know, we're already in that mindset of, well, we're never seeing Sunstreaker again, because who needs the previous yellow and black sports car guy? But when we realized what the mold could do, when the pictures started coming out and we could see the backside of the mold and we started figuring out, oh, that's what they're going to do, everyone lit up. I think everyone was down for this figure immediately. And here's the thing. I think a Sunstreaker presents better than Sideswipe. I think the Sunstreaker is a little bit superior to on this one. It's just a fun toy. I didn't even mention the part where the engine that they come with that mounts on the back, for Sideswipe, you're supposed to combine it with his weapon to create a bigger, better weapon, or you can put it on his back in order to make a jetpack. You know, it's supposed to be his jetpack from G1. On Sunstreaker, it's the turbo engine that sticks out behind his head in robot mode. Again, this toy was brilliant. This toy was legitimately genius. You know, it's still one of the most impressive toys that Hasbro and Takara have ever done. Okay, my list is out of order again because now we're going to talk about Tankor. I could have sworn I checked this before. I could have sworn I checked this before we got here. So Tankor was an attempt to do with Octane what they did with Astro Train in Classics. Try to take a triple changer, do it at deluxe size, but okay, Octane, or Tankor for trademark purposes, really suffers compared to Astro Train. Astro Train's suffering kind of worked in as a modern take on him, and they did a good job of kind of like conveying those changes and like wearing them well. You know, he wore his changes well, whereas Tankor unfortunately just comes up looking odd in all of his modes. Like, all of his modes kind of suffer. The tanker mode kind of gets away with it a little bit. The square tanker is a little bit weird, but, you know, whatever. The jet mode, the jumbo jet, the wings are way too small. That's always been the criticism of that one. Just like the wings are just way too tiny to look like it could fly. And then the robot mode obviously has some scrawny parts, some parts sticking out. It's got this gigantic comb, like this gigantic tooth weapon that's made out of his back. That's made out of like the truck mode rear instead of the shield, which is what he's known for. It's an awkward toy, because while, yes, there's a lot you can do with it, I think overall it's still a fun figure to mess with. It's definitely flawed. It definitely has its issues. Yeah, I can't in good consciousness put him any higher than, like, retail release, because he's definitely got some problems to him. I'm going to put him on the lower end. Because there's just better figures at that price point. Yeah, and I'm going to need more space at retail. Retail's about to cut off on the screen. I apologize for that, if it happens. All right, we're moving on to the last of the Legends classes. This is Warpath, and the Warpath is actually pretty neat. So it's, again, an upgrade of the original, well, a modernization of the original, let's call it that, because it is the H-Tank that Hasbro had adopted at this time to make transforming tanks a little bit easier on them. But he still presents this pretty buff, pretty, like, solid example of G1 Warpath, modernized and changed up, but it still kind of looked like him, and it continued this nice run of Legends mini-bots. I do think I want to put him a little bit higher, because he is a little bit more on the articulated side. His transformation's a little bit more involved than some of the others, so I'll definitely give him a little bit more credit and bump him up. I do think I liked him better than the tank Megatron, so where do I put him? If we're going bang for your buck, I do think he actually beats out Powerglide. Like, at a $5 figure, he's very, very neat, and really doesn't do anything terribly wrong. That's just an all-around good, tiny little Warpath. And then we get to the finale, which is Wheelie. So, the first time Wheelie had actually gotten a brand new toy since G1. This one is kind of cute. Again, it's a little bit more on the simple side of things. You know, arms are the sides of the cars, you know, that kind of transformation. He does get a little bit of a bonus because they included his slingshot as a little hidden detail on his arm kibble. That's kind of cute. That's kind of neat. The toy itself is fine. The toy itself is absolutely fine. You know, so I'm going to have to put him in retail regardless. Let's see what this does to the screen. Again, I think he is better. I think he's more characterful than the Hot Rod. I think he's a little bit more, I think he works a little bit better, looks a little bit better. Oh, good. It's just going to send it to a second row, so it shouldn't cut off. Okay. And that, yeah, and he's still just not as good as Cosmos. Like, I'm defending Cosmos very heavily in this list. But that's going to do it. So there is the first part of the Universe 2.0 tier listing that covers all the new molds and a couple of particular retools that I think were really important to talk about because, like I said, they changed things up pretty dramatically. Again, as with all tier lists, I expect this to be a subject of debate and criticism, and I know someone out there is going to defend the Galvatron, and then someone else is going to tell me why the Cyclonus should be in flea market. And that's all good. Just keep it civil in the comments, and you're good to go. But we'll see if we revisit this one for the repaints later on. So until then, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.